Title: Toxic Spaces, Tired Bodies, the Health Cost of My Environment. My name's Ethan. I live alone in a tiny rental flat on the third floor of an old building in Birmingham. From the outside, it looks charming to bricks, ivy on the walls. But inside, something feels off. For months, I've been dragging myself through each day. Tired, foggy, irritable. I wake up already behind, stare at my laptop like it's a wall, and crash by 7 p.m. on the sofa. I've tried blaming it on everything. Maybe I'm working too much. Maybe I'm just lazy. Maybe it's burnout. So I did what most people do when they feel off. I tried multivitamins, started lifting weights again, cut back on sugar. I even signed up for one of those guided meditation apps. None of it helped. Not really. Coffee stopped working. My thoughts stayed muddy. And I started feeling like a passenger in my own life, just coasting through it, barely responding. One morning, after snoozing through my alarm for the third time that week, I sat up in bed and looked around. The room was dark, even with the blinds open. A strange, musty smell hung in the air. My breath felt heavy. I stared at the ceiling and said aloud, "What if it's not me that's broken, but the space I'm living in?" It sounded silly at first, but the more I sat with it, the more it made sense. This flat was where I worked, ate, slept, and did everything in between. What if my body was reacting not to a personal failure, but to the place itself? I didn't know it yet, but that one question would change everything, because sometimes your environment isn't just background, it's the root of the problem. It started with an article I wasn't even looking for. I was scrolling through a health blog late one night, half asleep, half avoiding work, when a headline caught my eye. "Is your home making you sick?" I almost scrolled past it, but something about the title stuck. I clicked. The article talked about indoor air quality, about how most people spend over 90% of their time indoors, especially remote workers like me. It listed symptoms: fatigue, brain fog, poor sleep, irritability. It was like reading a checklist of my current life. Then it said, many people blame themselves for low energy, not realizing their environment is the real problem. That line hit hard. I stood up and walked around my flat, not to clean or rearrange, but to really see it. The living room, where I worked all day, had one small window. It opened about 2 inches before the hinge locked. Not enough for fresh air, especially with the building next door blocking most sunlight. The air always felt heavy, like it had nowhere to go. In the corner behind the bookshelf, I noticed a faint smell. Damp. I hadn't cleaned there in weeks. A quick check behind the curtain showed a small brown patch spreading up the wall. Mold, probably. I stared at it, wondering how long I'd been breathing it in. Then there was the noise. Constant traffic outside my window, especially during rush hour. I'd gotten so used to it, I barely noticed. But now, standing still, I heard every honk, every bus brake, every late-night engine. And don't even get me started on temperature. In winter, I had to sleep in socks and 2 hoodies just to stay warm. In summer, I'd wake up drenched in sweat, sticking to the sheets. My tiny space heater and noisy fan worked overtime year-round, but never really helped. It suddenly felt obvious. Maybe it wasn't just my habits that were hurting me. Maybe it was the very air I was breathing, the sounds invading my sleep, the light I wasn't getting, the mold I didn't notice, the flat that never felt truly comfortable. I sat back down, opened a new browser tab, and typed, "Can bad air make you tired?" Dozens of articles came up, scientific studies too. High humidity and poor ventilation could cause fatigue, headaches, poor concentration, even low immunity. Damp spaces with mold could trigger chronic inflammation, which affects energy levels. Noise pollution was linked to sleep disruption and higher cortisol. Lack of natural light messed with circadian rhythms. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. All this time, I'd been blaming myself. I thought I was lazy, weak, unfocused. But maybe I was just reacting to a toxic space zone that was slowly wearing me down. The more I looked around, the more convinced I became. This flat wasn't just a place I lived, it was a place that was affecting how I lived. And it was time to do something about it. Once the idea settled in that my flat might be the root of my fatigue, I couldn't ignore it. I decided to test the theory. Nothing scientific, just observations. The next morning, I took my laptop to the park. It wasn't warm, but the sun was out and the air was crisp. I found a bench near some trees and opened my emails. Within minutes, I noticed something strange. I could think. My thoughts weren't swimming upstream. The fog was gone. The following day, I went to a local coffee shop, just a chain near the high street. Nothing fancy. It was noisy, but in a different way. A human way. Conversations, milk frothing, the soft buzz of community. I worked there for 3 hours and even managed to finish a task I'd been avoiding for a week. By contrast, every time I returned home, it was like walking into a cloud. My shoulders dropped, my energy drained. Within half an hour of sitting at my desk, my head would ache slightly, my eyes would blur, and my body would slow down as if the flat had hit a dimmer switch. I needed proof, not just feelings. So I ordered a basic air quality monitor Oniton 28 next day delivery. When it arrived, I placed it in my living room and watched the readings climb. Humidity, 74%. Ideal indoor range, 40, 60%. COA levels, higher than average. No surprise, considering the poor ventilation. Temperature, cold, even though the heater was running. It was small confirmation of what my body already knew. The air inside my flat was stale, damp, and heavy. No wonder I felt the way I did. I moved the monitor to my bedroom. Same story. Even worse after a night with the windows shut. The space where I was supposed to rest and recover was actually suffocating me. This wasn't paranoia. This was proof. And for the first time, I felt like I could do something about it. Now that I had proof my flat was working against me, I decided to fight back. I didn't have the budget to move, but I could change what I could, control small shifts, one by one. The first thing I bought was an air purifier, a compact model with a HEPA filter. I placed it in the living room and ran it overnight. In just 2 days, the air felt lighter. I wasn't coughing in the morning anymore, and the musty smell faded a little. Next, I tackled the clutter. I'd always told myself I worked well in creative chaos, but deep down, I knew the piles of old mail, tangled cables, and dusty corners were stressing me out. I donated 2 bags of clothes, recycled old magazines, and cleared off my desk completely. Then, I added 2 plants of peace lily and a small snake plant. They didn't just freshen the air, they made the room feel alive. Noise was another battle. The traffic outside was relentless, so I got a pair of noise-cancelling headphones. Nothing fancy, just enough to take the edge off. For the first time in months, I could hear myself think. Then came the light. My desk used to face a wall. I turned it around so it faced the window, small as it was. It made a difference. I swapped out a harsh white bulb for a softer, warmer one and kept the curtains tied back all day. I also started sleeping with a salt lamp on and blackout curtains drawn tight. The orange glow calmed my nerves, and the darkness finally let me rest. I didn't expect miracles, but within 10 days, I started to feel like myself again. I was sleeping longer and waking up less groggy. My mind felt clearer. I could write emails without rewriting every sentence 3 times. The constant fatigue began to fade. Even my mood shifted. I wasn't snapping at texts or zoning out in meetings. One night, as I sat on the floor, stretching something I hadn't done in months, I looked around and whispered, "This isn't burnout. This is environmental burnout." It wasn't that I was lazy, or undisciplined, or broken. I was just overwhelmed by a space that wasn't built for healing. And by changing that space, even a little, I'd given my body permission to reset. That realization shook me, because it meant there was nothing wrong with me after all. I'd just been trying to heal in a place that kept hurting me. One quiet afternoon, I sat at my desno facing the light, plants framing the monitor, and took a long breath. It hit me how different I felt. Not perfect, not glowing with energy, but present. And that presence made space for a bigger thought. If my own flat could do this to me, what about everyone else? I started thinking about the offices I used to work in, windowless rooms with humming fluorescent lights and air conditioning that gave me headaches. I remembered school classrooms growing up cold in winter, boiling in summer, with barely a working fan between 30 kids. Even hospitals, where you'd expect healing, often smelled like disinfectant and recycled air. All these places, how many people were suffering, not because of poor choices, but poor environments? I started reading. The data was clear. Millions around the world live in homes and buildings that are making them sick. Poor ventilation, constant noise, damp, mold, lack of light. It's everywhere, especially in cities. Low-income housing often has the worst of it. The World Health Organization had even declared indoor environmental factors a major public health concern. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just my flat. It was a system that overlooks how space affects health, how walls, air, and light are as vital as diet and exercise. And for the first time, I let go of the shame I'd carried. The guilt of not being productive enough. The frustration of always being tired. The fear that something inside me was broken. None of it was really mine. I decided then that wellness, for me, would have to include my surroundings. No more treating environment like background noise. It's part of the story. I don't have a big platform, but I started sharing online, in small conversations, even at my GP's office when I went in for a checkup. Because if I could feel this shift with just a few plants, a filter, and some rearranged furniture, maybe others could too. And if nothing else, I could remind someone that sometimes it's not you, it's the space around you. I stood by the window small, stiff, barely open and gave it a push. Cool air drifted in, carrying the scent of the street below. I lit a candle on my windowsill. The soft flame flickered in the quiet and I whispered, "I'm finally breathing again." The room hadn't changed much, but I had. I used to think that eating well, working out, meditating, those were the things that made you healthy. And they do. But if your space is draining you, no amount of spinach or yoga will save you. It's like swimming against the tide with weights around your ankles. You can't always move. You can't always afford big fixes. But even small shifts, a window cracked, a clean desk, a plant in the corner can change everything. I know that now. Because I'm not just feeling better. I'm starting to live better. Moral lesson. Your health doesn't live in your body alone, it lives in your environment. Fix your space, and you might just fix your energy too. Ending CTA. Follow for more real-life health stories that go deeper than diet. Subscribe for weekly lessons that reconnect your space, body, and mind.